You know, Vice President, I was thinking about one of your social media posts recently where you go through all the things that Donald Trump has bailed out of, that he won't debate you, that he won't do interviews, that he's refusing to release certain information. And you asked an interesting question, what is he hiding?
Yeah.
So what in fact is he hiding?
Well, I wonder what is he hiding. I also wonder what his staff is trying to hide by preventing or suggesting he not debate me again, not do these interviews. It is the norm, as you know, that presidential nominees will do a 60 Minutes interview. He has refused to do that. He is pulling out of interviews left, right, and center. And I think that what we see about him in public, whether it be his rallies or, as you said, would it be called just a solo dance? I don't know that it
has I don't think it has a name to it.
Dance is really generous.
Yes, what that was. I think it does lead us, and it should lead us to observe that he is increasingly unstable. But you don't have to take my word for it. Listen to the people who know him best. The people who worked with him in the White House, in the Oval Office, in the Situation Room. His former chief of staff, 2 former secretaries of defense, his secretaries of defense, his former national security advisor, and of course his former vice president. And they have each talked about, the chief of staff, that Donald Trump has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. Not only has that been said by a former chief of staff of the former president, but we know he has openly talked about his intention to terminate the Constitution of the United States. I have taken that oath 6 times as district attorney, twice, elected and reelected, as attorney general of the largest state in California, twice, as United States Senator, and actually now as vice president. And the Congresswoman and I have talked about that. That is an oath one must take seriously. It is a duty to defend and honor and uphold the Constitution of the United States. He has said he would terminate it. Anyone who wants to be president of the United States should never again be able to stand behind the seal of the President of the United States, having said they would terminate the Constitution of the United States. And again, most recently, the report is that the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a decorated general, said of Donald Trump that he is fascist to the core. These are the people who know him best, people who worked with him. And so, yes, we can talk about that moment on stage of the music and all that, but I think it's very important that we acknowledge, and I've said publicly, Donald Trump is an unserious man. And the consequences of him ever being president of the United States again are brutally serious. Brutally serious. To the Congresswoman's point, I have now, as Vice President of the United States, met over 150 world leaders, presidents, prime ministers, chancellors, and kings. Many of them multiple times we are on a first-name basis. Most of them allies in connection with NATO, and I've met with them in connection with our standing rightly with Ukraine. The world is watching this election, and our allies are worried. Because the reality is that when we as the United States of America walk in these rooms around the world, we walk in chin up, shoulders back, with the earned and self-appointed authority to talk about the importance of democracy and rule of law. And being a role model, this is a room of role models, we know as a role model, people watch what you do to see if it matches up to what you say. One of my very real fears, Charlie, to be candid, is I hope that we as the American people fully understand how important America is to the world. I hope we really, really understand that. Because this is about what will happen to and with us as Americans, but it will impact people around the world.
Let me follow up on that, Congresswoman, because I was on a podcast recently with another pundit who was saying that she was afraid that America was sleepwalking into authoritarianism, that American voters were not sufficiently alarmed. And as the Vice President just said, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff just said that Donald Trump was the most dangerous threat facing the country. Do Americans in this last 15 days, do they understand that, and what has to happen in the next 2 weeks for them to really understand the danger?
Yeah, I think that they think they do. And, you know, one of the things I remind people is that although not every Republican who is casting a vote for Vice President Harris will say publicly that they are, there's clearly, you know, a threat associated with that in some instances. But millions will. And they will do that for a whole range of reasons. But what you mentioned is so important. I mean, when I think about, you know, the first time I ever voted was for Ronald Reagan. I've known presidents well, obviously, particularly I know a vice president well, in addition to Vice President Harris. And I watch how our presidents have operated. And even when there have been presidents that we have potentially disagreed with on issues, they've respected the Constitution. I mean, think about the 2000 election and how close that was, and what Vice President Gore did in his concession speech and ensuring that we had the peaceful transfer of power. And so I would just urge people, again, you don't have to take my word for it, but look at what the people closest to Donald Trump are saying about him. Look at the testimony of the leaders of his Justice Department, the leaders of his campaign, the most senior officials in his White House. Look at their testimony in front of the Select Committee. You know, they're the ones that told us everything that we know about his plan to overturn the last election, about what he did watching the attack from his dining room. We've never faced a threat like this before, and I think it's so important for people to realize this republic only survives if we protect it, and that means putting partisan politics aside and standing up for the Constitution and for what's right and loving our country more.
Do you think we'll be hearing more from some of those folks in the next 15 days, the generals, the chiefs of staff, the people who really understand exactly how unfit Donald Trump is?
I do. I also think that, you know, that they have been very clear so far. I mean, yeah. you've had hundreds of national security officials who served in Republican administrations endorse the vice president. Yeah. And all of the things that, you know, the fact that these people aren't endorsing, the fact that Vice President Pence was the most loyal person there was to Donald Trump, he won't endorse him because he knows Donald Trump asked him to violate his oath of office. Now, that should also give you a lot of pause about J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance is there because he will do what Donald Trump wants, and that makes him a particular danger to the republic as well.
And I'll add to that point. Understand also what happened in the last few months when the Supreme Court essentially told the former president he will be immune from anything he does in office. So whereas before there was at least some threat of consequence and accountability, that no longer exists. And to the Congresswoman's point, imagine Donald Trump, based on everything we know about him and everything we see now and before, imagine him with no guardrails. Because all of those folks who worked with him before, they're not, those who held him back, who attempted to ensure that he would follow the law, are no longer there. And we have the Supreme Court decision. So the stakes are very high.
Okay, let's go